Shelter Afrique opens discussions in Yaoundé on how to rescue Africa from its perennial housing crisis and provide decent and affordable houses for the continent's teeming population. Cameroon's Ministry of Public Health goes on the offensive with its COVID-19 vaccination campaign. The Secretary General of the Ministry, Professor Sinata Kulashiro, is live on the 7:30 News to shed light on the imminent campaign. Cameroon and the globe mark World Music Day as COVID-19 alters the musical note, writing off artists from popular shows and confining them to backstage activities. Those are our lead stories. Hello and thanks for joining us. I am Ben Menopofong and this is the 7:30 News.
I urge you once again to put on your face masks, to wash your hands regularly, and to consult a physician or any other health personnel if you notice any symptoms. This is the only way to save lives and to curb the spread of the virus.
You're welcome once again. Cameroon's Prime Minister says the huge deficit in decent and affordable housing in Africa requires innovative funding schemes and the use of local materials for it to be resolved. Joseph Diongute was speaking in Yaoundé today as he opened the 40th Annual General Assembly of Shelter Afrique, a Pan-African finance institution that supports the development of housing and real estate. The Yaoundé Confab brings together housing and real estate stakeholders from 44 African countries who are leading reflections on how to seek solutions to Africa's housing crisis. Christian Che-Atam reports on the stakes of the Yaoundé meeting.
Shelter Afrique was set up 40 years ago with the objective of addressing the acute shortage of decent and affordable housing in Africa. This 40th Annual General Meeting and Symposium is a forum to evaluate the performance of the company, but it is also bringing together policymakers and stakeholders of the housing sector to look for ways of improving access to decent housing in Africa. Discussions during the 7 days will focus on funding, land titling, and access to loans as ways of promoting decent and affordable housing in Africa. The Director General of Shelter Afrique, Andrew Shimpunda, and other officials of the company who spoke during the opening ceremony said the deficit in decent, affordable housing stands at 56 million units and is a war Africa must address in order to solve the ever-increasing rate of urbanization on the continent. In his keynote address, Prime Minister Joseph Diongute, representing the President of the Republic, lauded the huge support provided by Shelter Afrique to member countries.
I would like to take this opportunity to express my satisfaction at Cameroon's appointment as President of the Bureau of the General Assembly.
He urged delegates and members of the Board of Directors of Shelter Afrique to use local materials and inventive methods of financing in their strategy to boost the provision of decent and affordable housing in Africa. Deliberations at the 40th General Assembly of Shelter Afrique shall be sanctioned by a declaration dubbed the Yaoundé Declaration.
And the provision of decent and affordable housing remains a huge challenge in Africa as the continent's booming youth population flocks to the cities in search of work. Urbanization is placing an immense strain on affordable urban land and housing provisions. To address this challenge, governments are reviewing housing policies and taking measures to resolve the deficit in housing needs. Cynthia Saptala now reports on the housing needs as they exist in some other African countries.
The continued growth and expansion of African countries has increased the gap between the supply and demand of urban land and housing, with UN Habitat estimating that every day urban Africa will have an extra 40,000 persons to accommodate The housing deficit is a reality governments must face.
As a 33 billion population, we are still battling with a housing deficit of 2 million. Even though the private sector is able to roll out about between 40,000 to 50,000 annually, we should be looking at putting up between 170,000 to 200,000 houses a year.
In Burkina Faso, we are in need of 40,000 lodgings, and in more than 5 years, we have not been able to provide 6,000 houses.
A housing shortage that has forced governments to review existing schemes and policies in favor of reducing costs and tapping into local resources.
The president has introduced a rent-to-own policy. We are currently working on a housing authority to regulate the industry.
Given the huge population of Nigeria, the Nigerian government is in the process of reviewing the national housing policy.
In Kenya, we have put together a program to do 500,000 homes. Some of the policies that we put together in place is, for example, provision of land to investors.
With statistics showing that only 15% of the population in urban Africa can afford formal housing, building partnerships with groups in the private, NGO and community sectors are some of the solutions envisaged.
Ensuring that Africans have decent and affordable housing is core in the missions of Shelter Afrique. It also partners with governments to offer products and services to support efficient delivery of commercial real estate on the continent. Luma Slim Davis now profiles the Pan-African Funding Institution and its works on the African continent.
Shelter is a basic necessity for human existence. Unfortunately, not everyone have access to decent shelter, and this is a major challenge for Shelter Afrique.
Our role is really very much centered around affordable housing when it comes to supply, affordable housing when it comes to demand, which is then the mortgages, which is rental as well, because that's another avenue which we have to look at, and then also on the rent to buy. What we want to be doing further is bring in more countries and more shareholders who share with us this vision.
With a large deficit in decent housing facilities in Cameroon and Africa in general, a careful handling of the situation will require a huge financial package and professional tact.
The solution to housing is not just around funding, but it's also around making sure that policies are there to support housing, especially affordable housing development. Because we know that there are many facets that make up affordable housing, from land, infrastructure, from obviously building costs, but also that's just from supplying the house.
However, with the commitment of Shelter Afrique, the future looks promising.
It's 2.5 months today since Cameroon launched vaccination against COVID-19, with over 500,000 anti-COVID vaccines dispatched to vaccination centers across the country. Statistics from the Ministry of Public Health indicate that a little over 80,000 persons have received either the Sinopharm or AstraZeneca vaccine, out of which 20,000 have been served their complete doses. Rita Makang took interest in why Cameroonians are rather reluctant to go out for the COVID-19 jabs and brought back the following report.
Yaoundé city dwellers do have diverse opinions of the COVID-19 vaccine.
I did not take the dose of the coronavirus because I was not aware of the vaccine.
The dose against coronavirus because the minister advised us to take it.
I'm not yet taking, but I'm waiting the real time.
3 different viewpoints which might in one way or the other influence vaccination statistics nationwide.
We have been able to vaccinate over 83,000 persons with the first dose of both types of vaccines, and over 23,000 with the second dose.
At the Jungolo Hospital, which serves as an immunization center in Yaoundé, the figures have been fluctuating.
We can count some 300 people who have been vaccinated in this health center.
But what could explain this low turnout for the jab?
So many factors, some that we may not master too well, But for those we master, we think that interpersonal communication might help to improve vaccine uptake.
Everything being equal, government plans to re-examine the long-term and short-term measures instituted by state authorities to accelerate the admission of vaccines against the coronavirus.
And as I was announcing in the headlines, our guest on the 7:30 News tonight is Professor Sinata Kulashil, who is president of the Scientific Council for Public Health Emergencies. Professor, good evening.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Ben Mend.
Now, you've just watching that report there. We Cameroonians are not feeling they're feeling rather lukewarm going out for the COVID-19 vaccine. How would you explain this rather lukewarm attitude from the part of Cameroonians? Less than 100,000 of them have so far been vaccinated.
Thank you very much for this question, but I think many Cameroonians are afraid to be vaccinated. And they need to be informed on the benefits of vaccines versus the common side effects that they've been hearing about. They are afraid because they think the vaccine may make them sick. Some of them think the vaccines can give them COVID. Some of them think the vaccines have been brought to Africa to exterminate Africans, whereas we now know that over 2 billion people have been vaccinated worldwide. And in fact, the countries where most of the vaccines are fabricated are the countries where you have the most take-up of the vaccines.
Now, tell me a bit, Professor, the problem, you are insinuating, seems to lie in the lack of information. And I understand that the Ministry of Public Health will, in the days ahead, be launching from the 7th to the 11th of this month, of next month, be launching a campaign to raise awareness on this. Why is that message not going through? What is it going to look like, this your campaign?
Well, I think what the ministry intends to do is to accelerate the campaign, the vaccination campaign, and inform Cameroonians on really the efficacy of the vaccines, letting them know that it is better to be vaccinated than not to be vaccinated, because if you're not vaccinated, you can acquire the disease and you can die of the disease. Whereas being vaccinated, you will not present with severe form of disease, and secondly, you may not die of COVID. We've seen, at least most of us, I think many people have had people around them in their families, friends that they know who have died of COVID-19. So it is not, as people still think, it is not that COVID-19 does not exist. It really exists, and we should be frightened that we should not be sick. And we know that once you are vaccinated, even if you fall sick, one, the vaccination cannot give you COVID, unlike the fake news around in the social media. None of the available vaccines will give you COVID. And then you will protect your own self from getting sick. And then, of course, you'll also prevent the other members of the community to get sick. What is important about vaccination is that the more you vaccinate, the less you have the virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus circulating, and the more we acquire immunity and the herd immunity that will permit us to live a normalcy in the long run.
And we equally get news that some African countries are already being confronted with a third wave of the coronavirus. And we in Cameroon, we are keeping our fingers crossed that we should not get there. But what are the measures that are being put in place? Should we be surprised at any moment by that third wave that we don't pray to happen in our country?
We should not take things for granted. The fact that the COVID-19 infection is diminishing should not make us think that we are exempt from the third wave. And that is why it is very important for this vaccination campaign. And I think what the ministry intends to do, we are in the scientific committee. In the scientific council, what we have told the ministry, the Minister of Public Health and the government, is to accelerate this campaign and to really give information to Cameroonians to know the importance of vaccination. So the campaign which the ministry wants to, not only the ministry, I mean the government now is planning to give, is to be more, to be of proximity. Because some people are not even aware of the vaccination, because you should not think that everyone knows what it is and where they can be vaccinated and why they should be vaccinated. So there needs to be communication, more communication in different languages, not only in our official French and English language, but in the different languages, and also use the different media to be able to take across the message of the importance of being vaccinated. If not, of course, we will also go into this third wave. And if you say third wave, the third wave may be due to new variants for which the available vaccines may not be efficacious. And that is why it is important for us to be vaccinated more and more, so as not to have mutants, and so that even when the mutants arrive in our country, we are already protected against, we already have antibodies against those variants, and at least we have a high immunity that may permit us not to be able to succumb to the new variants.
Now, Professor Kulashio, we are talking about the coronavirus in Cameroon, that of the statistics are not indicating now that the figures are dropping, infections are not increasing. In this such an atmosphere where there is general feeling that we are getting out of the red zone, how would you convince me to go and receive a vaccine when I know the thing is like going out?
Okay. It is true the statistics are dropping, but we know in countries where the statistic dropped and where after the statistic dropped, some variants came in and they became the predominant variant. I'll take the example of Great Britain. I can take the other example of where you have this wave in the African continent. For me to convince you, I have to tell you that it is not because we are seeing the COVID-19 going down. The drop in the number of cases are due to many factors, of which, of course, I will cite vaccination, of which I will also cite the fact that some people continue to administer the barrier measures, washing of hands, wearing of face masks, and social distancing, because both measures are important, vaccination and still continue to
respect the barrier measures.
Yes, to respect the barrier measures. So, to convince you, I'll tell you that it's not because it is dropping. You may be at risk. You may be at risk, and because you may be at risk, if you contract the coronavirus, it may be the fatal issue for you. It is dropping, but we are still seeing people dying because they've not been vaccinated. Okay. So it's better to be vaccinated because it's better for you to protect yourself from being seriously sick and from dying, and also to allow your community, the entire nation, our different families, to acquire this immunity that will permit us in the long run to curb the corona viral disease 2019 COVID.
Now, if I understand you well, the way to go is vaccination.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Vaccination and continuous respect of barrier measures. Both should go
together. That was Professor Sinata Kulashiro. She is the president of the Scientific Council for Public Health Emergencies in Cameroon, and she was shedding us some light there on the new campaign that the Ministry of Public Health and the entire government will be launching in Cameroon from the 7th to the 11th of July nationwide to stem and to encourage Cameroonians to go out for the vaccine. Thank you very much for your input, ma'am.
Thank you very much for inviting me to share the light that I've just been able to give.
Okay, stay with me now while we go on for the other issues of the news. The Prime Minister, head of government, has been underscoring the place of the education and protection of the girl child in Cameroon, saying it's a major point of interest for the government. He was speaking in Yaoundé today as he launched a United Nations initiative to educate and protect the girl child, codenamed Education Plus. Christian Cheatam reports on an event that was attended, amongst others, by members of the civil society and traditional rulers.
The initiative to reduce HIV infection and empower young girls, known as Education Plus, has two objectives: maintain young girls in school through the secondary cycle and reinforce sex education. Education Plus will be implemented through education, mobilization, and advocacy to encourage stakeholders invest in the education of the girl child. Prime Minister Joseph Diongote, representing the President of the Republic, thanked the United Nations for inviting Cameroon to the initiative.
I would like to reiterate the importance that the head of state attaches to its total success. I urge public and private actors to pool their efforts and resources in order to place young women at the center of their concerns, so that they can have the educational background necessary to mitigate the prevalence of HIV/AIDS.
The initiative to reduce HIV infection and empower the girl child is a UN initiative to be executed from 2021 to 2025. The resident coordinator of UN systems in Cameroon, Matthias Knapp, speaking during the launch, invited stakeholders in the country to adhere to the initiative in order to reduce HIV infection and improve the situation of young girls in Cameroon.
The National Book Commission of Cameroon has refuted allegations of conflicts of interest and financial impropriety in its management style, as reported in some newspapers in the country. The alarm was triggered by a petition purportedly written by a Cameroonian book publisher denouncing favoritism in the designation of publishing houses on the national book list. That is the bone of contention in our talk of the day slot tonight with Kilian Ndandifon.
The origin of newspaper reports and questions from a member of parliament on the availability of textbooks this year is a petition from NMI publishers accusing the National Book Commission of corruption in authors' evaluation, financial payments, conflict of interest, pressure and intimidation, and arbitrary dictates on the publishing industry. But the National Book Commission refutes all the allegations.
That same publisher is the one who have 71 books on the list out of 304. In case of corruption, I think the most corrupted should be the one who have the bigger number of textbooks on the list.
Another accusation is that favors are made to fringe over local publishers.
And those publishers have only 12% of the share of the market. and it was bigger before we arrived in 2018.
The National Book Commission and some publishers see a different motive in the accusations.
I just also, like you, hear about striker in the newspapers. For we publishers, we don't know that there's a plan like that.
Some of the 50 registered publishers in Cameroon may sympathize with the petition, but none has identified with any strike action suggested in the press.
The written phase of the Probatoire Général examination kicked off today across the national territory with reports of a smooth start from all the accommodation centers in the country. In the Ekunu and Coleton accommodation centers here in the nation's capital, over 2,000 candidates answered present for the takeoff, as Alice May now tells us.
At Lycée Bilingue de Coleton, 1,190 candidates are sitting for the exams. Alarm to kick off with the first paper, literature, was heard at exactly 8 a.m. School bus took turns to the various classrooms, assuring all was set for a hitch-free examination. At Lycée de Kunu, 955 candidates are facing the official exams. Latecomers are seen rushing to their various classrooms while security men are there for orderliness.
The 40th edition of the World Music Day was being commemorated in Cameroon, and the event was been running under the slogan "Music at the Intersection Arts and Culture." Then Arts and Culture Minister Bidung Pat used the occasion to magnify and highlight the genius and creativity of artists who, despite the current pandemic, have been working and releasing quality works of art in Cameroon. He also saluted the resilience of musicians through the use of digital platforms to safeguard their activities by offering virtual concerts to music lovers around the country. The Music Day in Cameroon also was celebrated in memory of artists who died of the coronavirus, especially people like Manu Dibango. And so we continue to say as the COVID-19 pandemic imposed a lockdown negatively affecting most sectors of most sectors of life, the music sector was tested positive for the flu, resulting to an unexpected temporary shutdown of live performances. This caused some artists to switch to a new avenue of promoting their works, including online platforms like Facebook and Instagram. With empty stages and dance floors, the pandemic aroused creativity on the part of most artists who reinvented live musical experiences both for artists and their guaranteed consumers. Here now is Beauty's Room with the report on how COVID-19 has reshaped the creativity of artists.
When a virus sets new rules, the world adapts. So too has Cameroonian musicians. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, Meshi, a Cameroonian artist, has not lost a fan. Instead, she has gained in popularity. COVID-19 forced her to think out of the box.
For example, I released my album and I did sales on Oxplay. We keep in touch with our fans by doing live videos on blogs and also on our pages. For example, my page has grown to 333,000 more followers as compared to even before the COVID-19 when it was just on 100,000 followers.
As music venues closed up in Cameroon, DJs, producers, and many in the industry, rather than rely on the traditional stage and live audience setup, used other venues to put out their live content.
Our promotion, we've really been relying a lot more on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp. We just hope that things are going to get better real soon.
We have installed WePocus, which is opening them to the world to ensure that Cameroon music, which is used out of Cameroon, will be paid for.
The audience is now online. Artists and brands are getting smarter to beat the threat of the COVID pause on mass gatherings, even though musicians and fans have gradually but surely started visiting local venues again.
And so the coronavirus pandemic has silenced the noise from musical concerts as all outdoor events through which musicians in Cameroon made money. And so survival tactics like creating brands and marketing them, collaborating with business persons by using their social media platforms to advertise for such businesses. For such business tycoons have been adopted by lots of musicians in the country. As Emmanuela Vermio reports, such options are enabling the artist to make to eke a living in the absence of popular studios.
No longer able to set the stage ablaze with musical concerts on suspension as COVID-19 continues to make victims, musicians in Cameroon have settled for safer survival techniques that bring money in. The social media platforms seemingly easing things for them. The new trend is the swift transition from singing to entertain to playing comic skit. A whopping 80% of new generation artists with Mings, Mr. Shine and more have taken to Facebook and TikTok with comedy that draws a multitude of followers. With such a numerical strength to their credit, these artists now strike publicity deals with businesses by advertising on these highly followed platforms. Creating brands and marketing them too is on an increase. Vernutina, Jovi Le Monstre, Pascal Young King and many other artists have continuously released branded items, t-shirts, caskets, shoes and other wares for sale. As fans place commands, so too is money constantly flowing into their accounts. What about the focus on music publishing? This is another method employed by musicians during this period of the coronavirus spread. Songs, beats, and other rhythms are created and sold out to those in need and are either used as theme songs for movies or sports. Artists in Cameroon have learned the new trends of keeping their arts alive while making money.
Though upcoming artists appear to be ever so prolific with the opportunities offered by technological advancements and science, many observers seem to agree that present-day music is empty in content and does not follow after the examples of the icons of yesteryears. Many Cameroonians get away with the impression that the desire for fast cash has led to the production of loud-sounding music which soon fades away for lack of meaning or compelling content or even rhythm. Here now is Constantine Baum with a look at the worrying situation of music.
Music of yesteryears that kept listeners and viewers entertained till date. It was music for the soul. Some will describe it as time immemorial, having no exact limits, as the younger generation still enjoys such music today. Some of the icons are dead, but their music is still alive. They were professionals giving all their best, making Cameroon to be recognized internationally. From the 60s, 70s, 80s, through the 90s, their works still challenge songs of this generation. Some of the urban sounds of this generation have become questionable.
As an artist, you represent a whole nation and a cultural background. So you have to be very exigent, you have to be very strong in your convictions to defend what you are part of.
There is hope, however, as some young Cameroonians are determined to walk the path created by the icons of the good old days. That is why they have turned to live music, training to become professionals.
Away from music, we go to Parliament, where the ordinance which increases the 2021 state budget from 4,865.2 billion CFA francs to 480.4 billion has been adopted at the National Assembly. This was at an ordinary sitting today chaired by House Speaker Kavai Yege Jubril. The bill that organizes and promotes volunteering in Cameroon was also endorsed during the sitting. Details with Esther Kmer.
The increase of 615.2 billion CFA francs in absolute terms of the 2021 state budget prompted the queue of legislators to query the basis influenced by the coronavirus pandemic.
Parliament gave a sum of 150 billion to the fight against COVID in December, and now they're raising it to 200 billion.
For government, the raise is guided by the need to adopt emergency budgets for health and security purposes.
We had some resources before, and now we have added, let's say, 30 billion just for the internal debt. With this problem of coronavirus, nobody can say that we have come to the end of the crisis. One of the big commitments is the vaccination. We have to pay vaccine. We have to vaccinate a lot of people.
To organize and promote volunteering in Cameroon as a key element for sustainable development, a 33-section bill was endorsed.
That law will create a suitable environment for the development of volunteering and the promotion of volunteering. And it organizes also the relationship between the different stakeholders.
Its role in peace building and social cohesion was applauded.
Informally, this has been going on, but if we put a law in place, it will encourage many of our youth to go into volunteerism.
A department for the social integration of youth and volunteering will now be part of the ministry's organization charts.
That's where we'll leave it for this evening. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 7:30. Bye-bye.